Evolution evolves because it feels good. Wow. If you get that, then you get it that evil is a failure of pleasure. Suffering is a failure of pleasure, and pleasure is an inherent birthright. So, welcome everyone. And we have to be in the fullness of joy and in the fullness of celebration and in the fullness of the garden, right? Right? Even when we're dealing with the most intense and painful suffering in the world. There's a book behind me on the shelf. And by the way, we're just getting at our new center in Vermont. We're just getting all the books up, which is, critically important for the work, God us willing, of the next decade. So I'm excited that we're finally getting ready to take the next stage in the great library. But in the fullness of the suffering, we need to be in the garden. And this is one of the themes that we say time and again, right? And the theme is, and it's this beautiful theme, what happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? That's the great poem of Langston Hughes. And Langston Hughes is saying is you can't defer the dream. You can't wait. There's a book behind me that I was referring to a second ago. See if I can find it here for you for a second. Yeah. Here it is. Called Laughter in Hell. Right? And Laughter in Hell is about, very few people bought the book. People didn't quite know what to make of it, but it's actually about jokes, laughter, celebration in the concentration camps. So when I say Christina's in the Garden of Eden, I'm not being light or cute or how can you be light and cute? We just talked about Turkey and Syria. What we're saying is that in order not to become bitter and to lose our connection to the fullness of reality, even as we face outrageous pain, we need to be in outrageous love. And we need to live in the truth of laughter, which embraces all paradox, even as we deny easy theologics, easy answers, be they new age or contemporary or ancient, to outrageous pain. And, maybe what we should do even right now, Krista and Tahali, we've never done this before. Let's maybe bring everyone on right now. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Fantastic. Awesome. Gorgeous. Gorgeous. And it's gorgeous to see everyone. And it's gorgeous to be together. Okay. So I'm going to turn to David to read the code, right? And then I'm going to do a little recapitulation, and then we're going to move into Q&A. Okay. Because it was such a big topic, such an important topic last week, and we got so many questions. We thought that would be like a great thing to do. I turn to David. David, give us the code.
We live in a world of outrageous pain. The only response is outrageous love. We live in a world of outrageous pain, and the only response is outrageous love. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you, David. So I'm going to do just a little recapitulation on all this, okay, just for a few minutes. It's now 1:18 in Vermont, and so give me like 7-8 minutes, and then we go into Q&A. Fair, everybody? We good? Okay. So first, just a little story. My friend, Sally Rainey, I was just thinking about who I haven't seen in a while. Sally is a great person. She has a great partner, Ted Turner. And Sally was involved with our board for a bunch of years, kind of from like 2000 and I don't know, 13, 14, 15, 16, something like that. And there was a certain moment when I just personally myself had just kind of run into a brick wall. You know what happens when you run into a brick wall? Who's run into a brick wall? Show of hands, right? You're a brick wall, right? Brick wall, like there's no place to move, right? And it was just this moment, right, where I just felt like there's just nothing left to say. There's just nothing left to say. It was 2012. Shahat was on the line from Vanuatu, right? That was remember Jane, Vanuatu? Remember Vanuatu, a place called Vanuatu, right? And we were doing the beginning of what we called Dharma circles. And there were about, 50, 60 people on the line. It was what I think was called the circle back then or something like that. And I'm supposed to start talking. Enoch, remember those days, right? And I'm supposed to start talking and I just couldn't say anything. There was just nothing to say. It was just a moment where like the level of corruption and pain and just kind of disappointment. I was just so incredibly disappointed and pained by reality. And I just couldn't say anything. And, people were being very wonderful and respectful and silent, thinking that I was going through some profound experience of deep silence. I wasn't, right? I just had nothing to say. And I really thought, okay, it was just this moment. I thought, okay, I'm done. Right? This is like, I'm done teaching. There's nothing I can actually say in the face of it. And literally, I was at Sally Kempton's house. I literally don't even know what happened, but this is what happens when spirit seizes you. It's actually a genuine, real experience that's empirically verifiable. And your experience is that something takes you over, right? But you've got to clarify your experience to know that it's a daemon and not a demon, right? Because both daemons and demons move to take us over, right, Harry? So you got to make sure who's taking you over here. So it was daemonic, Daemonic, meaning it felt clarified. And then I said this line, which I had no idea where it came from, which is, we live in a world of outrageous pain. And the only response to outrageous pain is outrageous love. And I talked for like an hour. And when it was over, I had no memory of what we said. We still have the recording of it. Sally was there, Sally Kempton, and she actually took notes on it because she said she just kind of felt this whole new world open up. And that's where the outrageous love teaching was actually born. And right around that time, I shared that teaching a little later with Sally Rainey, who was literally the next day on the way to see the Pope. So she texts me, she goes to see the Pope, and she said, the only thing I could say to the Pope was, we live in a world of outrageous pain. The only response to outrageous pain is outrageous love. And the Pope he got it, right? You get it in your body, right? And there's something that you get in your body even before explanations. Does everyone get what I mean by that? Right? And you kind of get it in this embodied sense, right? We live in a world of outrageous pain, right? The only response to outrageous pain is outrageous love. And one of the things we did last week was to kind of unpack what that means, right? We're confronted with the outrageous pain of hell, right? Problems from hell. Samantha Powers, who was a key advisor to the Obama administration on the issue of suffering, wrote a book called A Problem from Hell. And it talked about the 7 genocides of the 20th century and how world governments responded or didn't respond to them. And essentially, she maps out the 7 possible responses to a genocide, right? From actual boots on the ground, meaning actual intervention, to kind of some sort of significant protest, and points out that in all of the 7 genocides, essentially nothing happened. And all 7 responses essentially didn't happen, didn't come out of, didn't emerge from the civilized world. But what does that mean? These are problems from hell, right? Turkey, right? Syria, it's a problem from hell. So how do you respond, right, to a problem from hell? And one of the things we pointed out last week is the primary reason, right? Everyone with us? And we're just now we can see each other. We're in full, right? We're fully inside. The primary reason why people reject living in a system of value and actually being part of a larger order of spirit that guides me is because of this enormous problem of pain, right? This problem of evil, right? If she is all love and she is all goodness, right? And she is, right? She is, meaning the power of the universe. Let me say it. And of course, this is for Elena, although we're going to be recapitulating last week. I'm going to say it in a completely different way. Let me try and say it this way. if our notion of spirit or of a God goddess is that God goddess is omnipotent and all powerful, omniscient, all knowing, right? And good, right? So every realization in all the great traditions of God is that God knows it all, is all powerful, and is good. The only problem is that suffering doesn't seem to work with that. So if God's aware of everything and all powerful and good, then that doesn't seem to work. And so if you actually trace the history of thought, stay close, friends. Let's do this really seriously. If you trace the history of thought, what you'll see is that different schools of thought rejected one of the three. Does everyone track that with me? In other words, God's all-knowing, but not all-powerful. So she's stuck. God's as powerless as you are, right? And one famous expression of that position, which exists all through, was a huge popular book in the United States that went bestseller in the United States and all through Europe by a guy named Harold Kushner called, what was it called? It was called When Bad Things Happen to Good People. Who remembers that book? Anyone remember that book? I'm just looking around. Few people remember it, right? When Bad Things Happen to Good People. I wrote my first public article, right, rejecting that book and a very serious critique of it called as Religion for the Happy-Minded, right? Because basically what he was saying is, God's got the same problem you do. Goddess can't handle this. No power. God, maybe all-knowing, maybe good, but not powerful. You get what I mean? Right? Other thinkers, right, made a major move, which is, God's real powerful, but it's not really tracking everything. God's not tracking the news, right? In other words, divinity is not all-knowing, right? Or divinity is not good. Divinity is a neutral force of cosmos, right? And the notion that God as a neutral force of creativity is one of those explanations, right? God's a neutral force of creativity, and it's just unleashed creative force, but with no sense of goodness, right? There's not an inherent moral arc to the cosmos. And all three of those positions are a mistake, right? In other words, all of them, right, refuse another possibility. And the other possibility is the mystery, right? That actually we have a direct experience of a force of cosmos that inheres in cosmos, stay close, that inheres. Everyone get what I mean by the word inheres? It's inherent. It inheres, I-N-H-E-R-E-S, inheres. It inheres in cosmos, and it knows everything. So if you want to get a sense of that, so get the sense of John Stuart Bell, right, who talks about the non-locality of the quantum universe, in which the entire quantum universe is entangled, right? Zohar, you and I just wrote a footnote on this in one of the books. The entire quantum universe is entangled with all the rest of the quantum universe. And once one quantum particle touches another particle, they know everything about each other forever. And since divinity, as it were, right, the field of creativity is touching everything, so there's constant knowing through the system. Or if you want to check it another way, you have somewhere between 37.2 trillion to 100 trillion cells, right? Right. Jolene. Hi, Jolene. Jolene, you have somewhere between 37.2 to 100 trillion cells. And we were trying to figure out how many the other day. We were counting and we couldn't quite figure it out. We lost count a few times. I was with Christina Amelon on the phone. We were counting, trying to figure it out. We couldn't figure it out. But there's a lot of cells. But here's the deal. They all know each other. They all know everything that's going on in each other. That's wild. That's omniscience, right? Terry, isn't that beautiful image for omniscience, right? Every cell knows what every other cell is doing. Like, wow. So that's, you get a sense, right, Paul, of omniscience, right? Right? This kind of sense of all knowing, right? Now, in sense of power, right? The sense of power, right? The notion that actually, right, this force of divine creativity has the power to initiate the Big Bang, has the power to set up the laws of mathematics, right? It has the power to develop photosynthesis, not bad. Mitosis and meiosis, well done, right? But kind of lost power as human beings came on board. What happened? But it just makes no sense, right? That power actually disappears. Divinity is emptied of power. Doesn't make sense. And this is one of the big mistakes right, Jamie, that the Claremont folks make, right? They don't know how to deal with this notion of power. But when we say divine power, we don't mean an all-powerful fairy god. We mean that the power of the universe is all-knowing. It has a personal dimension and a systems dimension. And notice the words we're using. I'm not saying a personal and an impersonal, right? That's a better way to say it, right, Daniel? Right, Daniel Reader, right? Instead of saying personal and impersonal, we're saying a personal dimension and a systems dimension. It's a much better way to say it, right? So there's a personal dimension of divinity and a systems dimension of divinity. And those are all powerful. And we have a direct experience of goodness, right? That's why we call God good. But actually we have cross-cultural information, right? Based on developmental research, right? Which actually is that the experience that the world should be fair is an experience that all children experience cross-culturally, right? From the earliest ages. I mean, you can't say that it's a particular cultural notion, right? The notion of fairness, right, is inborn. And there's an enormous developmental literature about this that Zach and I were just talking about the other day. Okay. So what does that mean? That means that we actually have to hold the mystery, right? And we actually have to hold the mystery, meaning we actually don't understand, right? We don't understand suffering. Yes, we understand that suffering makes us more noble. Yes, we understand that we need to be freely choosing, that human beings choose, and that much of suffering ascribed to God is actually human beings making choices. Yes, we understand that there's a larger play than just this lifetime, right? And that actually, if you actually look across lifetimes, suffering would be understood completely differently. That's number 3. Yes, number 4, we understand that if you actually understand that when you die, right, however you die, you're actually entering into an entirely new world, right, of reality and beauty and goodness, right? And you actually have that experience, then obviously you're going to experience the experience of death differently. Those are all true. All 4 of those things are true. Nonetheless, we cannot use those to in any way deny the tragedy of suffering. We live in a world of outrageous pain, and the response is not what the religions called theodicy, meaning an explanation of why it happens. So the four possible explanations I just listed are given in different ways by the great traditions, and they're true, but insufficient. That you can't use those to avoid the tragedy, right? And no theodicy works in the face of burning children in Auschwitz, or in the face of children buried for days, suffocating under rubble. No theodicy holds. No theodicy holds. There is no theodicy that's kosher in the face of crushed human bodies and agonizing pain. And anyone who sells you a theodicy that's kosher, stop the conversation. It's over. And whether it's a New Age theodicy, right, you attracted it into your life, whether it's a religious theodicy, it's some form of sin and punishment, it's some form of a broader afterlife system, it's some form of what's called a soul-making theodicy, right? It's whatever the form is. I just listed 4 forms, and it's not that they're wrong. You got what I'm saying? Not that they're wrong. There's validity to each one of them. But the only response to outrageous pain, the first response has to be, we live in a world of outrageous pain. The only response to outrageous pain is outrageous love. And we said last week, and with this I'm going to finish, we said last week that means 2 things. 1, commit outrageous acts of love, right? In other words, right? You meet outrageous pain. So Nachman of Breslov, one of my lineage masters, says, atheism was created for the meeting with outrageous pain. Right? When you meet outrageous pain, become an atheist. Meaning don't rely on God, don't rely on a theodicy, don't rely on the next lifetime, right? Don't rely on any explanation. You meet outrageous pain, commit outrageous acts of love. There is no God, it's just you. It's your response. The only response to outrageous pain is outrageous love, number 1. But the second meaning of that statement, we live in a world of outrageous pain. The only response to outrageous pain is outrageous love, is that and this is so critical. With this, I want to finish and we'll open up. But this is like crazy critical. It changes everything. In other words, you can't demand a fair world. You can't be motivated to heal the world. You can't be motivated to commit outrageous acts of love You can't be motivated to demand with your activism and with your protest that there not be outrageous pain unless outrageous pain is a violation of something, right? It shouldn't be that way, right? If the world is happenstance, if the world is accident, if the world is random, if the world is meaningless, well, so it's a dog eat dog or tooth eat claw world, if I can mix metaphors. And people in Turkey are certainly going to just try and make a little money, right? And they won't, do the right building codes, and they'll use the amnesties, and buildings will fall down and children will be buried for days. That's just the way it goes. We should be used to that. It's been that way throughout all of history. Just what happens, right? Whatever. Shouldn't even move us. But we are moved. We're not just moved, we're outraged. We call that pain outrageous. It's a violation of the way reality should be. Why? Because the universe is a love story. Because reality is an intimate universe, right? Because an outrageous love, when we say the universe is a love story, we don't mean ordinary love, right? Enoch, we mean outrageous love. We've been talking about that for a bunch of years together, right? Outrageous love. And outrageous love is another name for Eros. And Eros is the quality of Eros, of love, the self-organizing cosmos that is the quality of reality itself, right? Now, what's the interior? I want to add one thing to last week. What's the interior experience of Eros? What does Eros feel like on the inside? Pleasure. Isn't that wonderful? But what Eros feels like on the inside is pleasure. Now, by pleasure, I don't mean ice cream, although let's not like ice cream. And I remember when we went from 2 flavors when I was a kid, or 3, vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry. And then I remember the first Baskin Robbins. I don't know what they have in Europe, but the first Baskin Robbins had 31 flavors. I was 10 years old. It was an ecstatic moment of my childhood. Oh my God, 31 flavors. I don't want to knock ice cream for pleasure. Like, ice cream matters, and the world would clearly be a less good place without ice cream. That's clear. But when I say pleasure, I'm saying something much, much deeper, right? And a bunch of us, a couple of years ago, Shahati created a festival, and we talked about the 10 voices of pleasure and the 23 principles of pleasure and the 6 levels of pleasure. So pleasure is a far more nuanced thing. Pleasure is the source of all ethics, right? Pleasure, clarifying your pleasure, knowing your true pleasure is everything, right? So pleasure is much deeper than ice cream, and every level of pleasure has a counterfeit and an authentic form. That's a big story. But if we really get this, I want to put 3 things together. We really get this. Like, number 1, we live in a world of outrageous pain. The only response is outrageous love. Number 1. Number 2, outrageous love means not ordinary love, but love that's the heart of existence itself. 2. 3, that outrageous love is what we call Eros. 3. 4, the interior feeling of Eros is pleasure, right? Clarified pleasure, right? The deepest sense of pleasure. Those 4 make sense, everybody? Everybody, show of hands. Anybody? Those 4 make sense? Those 4 make sense? Okay, so now you get this next sentence. This is a crazy, beautiful sentence. So evil is a failure of pleasure, right? Get that leap, right? Evil, no, stay with me, Carrie, stay with me for a second. It's a leap, right? You got to stay with me for a second, Carrie, right? Evil is a failure of clarified pleasure. In other words, let me say it clearly. Pleasure is a birthright. It's not an entitlement and a kind of privileged entitlement. It's a birthright. That's why we have food. Right? We don't have little pills. We have food, right? We have colors. We have skin, right? We have nerve receptors on skin, right? We have natural beauty, right? We have taste. We have touch, right? These are all forms of pleasure, right? And pleasure is an inherent structure of reality. And actually, the evolution of reality is also the evolution of pleasure. We have deeper and wider forms of pleasure and deeper capacities to receive pleasure. So for an example, this is really beautiful. An enlightened person, right, can actually get ecstatic pleasure from drinking a glass of water. In Zen, they call that the Japanese tea ceremony. That's what it's called, right? Ecstatic pleasure from drinking a cup of tea. Okay? Right? Like, wow. And it's the deeper, the more clarified you are, the more pleasure you get from ordinary activity. So in addiction means I simply can't get pleasure from ordinary life activity. That's what addiction means. Addiction is the inability to derive pleasure from ordinary life activity. Enlightenment, right, is the opposite of addiction. Enlightenment is the capacity to derive unimaginable depths of pleasure from ordinary life activity. Right? like, wow, right? So evil, suffering, is a violation of the birthright to pleasure, which is the inherent nature of reality. So if you actually understand the experience of atoms who are attracted to each other, or the experience of subatomic particles that are attracted to each other, they're experiencing a kind of quantum hedonism, right? Peter, quantum hedonism. And I'm using that word precisely. It's actually used by Kaufman, right, in an article, Kathy Kaufman. She's actually the wife of Stuart Kaufman, right? Writes a formal academic article where she refers to this quantum hedonism, meaning that the experience of pleasure is all the way down and all the way up. And if you want to know what drives evolution, so I want to give you a big sentence, and this is a second simplicity sentence, right? Not a first simplicity sentence, not a casual sentence. Oots, it's so good to see you. I didn't see right. Yay, it's great to see you, man. What a pleasure, right? What a pleasure. So this is a second simplicity sentence coming at you. This is integrating an enormous amount of information and footnotes. Okay, Janice, ready? Sentence for you, sir. Right? And by the way, if I had that beard, I would look far wiser. So I'm considering it. That's like, you can't go wrong, man. Okay? So ready? This is a great sentence. This is a great sentence, right? Evolution evolves because it feels good. I want you to get that sentence. It's a crazy important sentence. Evolution evolves because it feels good. But that's not a casual sense, not a cute sense. It's not a kind of, right? And when we say feels good, David, we got to clarify feeling good. So an addict has a surface experience of feeling good, which leaves a terrible aftertaste, which actually it's not feeling good. It's got to feel good over long periods of time. Got to define what feeling good means, but feeling good's got to be sustainable, right? Across time. It's not just an instantaneous good. It's a good that sustains itself, right? Stana, right? Or Stana, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, right? It's a great sentence. Evolution evolves because it feels good. Wow. If you get that, then you get it that evil is a failure of pleasure. Suffering is a failure of pleasure, and pleasure is an inherent birthright. So we tried to recapitulate last week, but I didn't want to bore you if you were here last week, and I didn't want to bore myself, right? And it's, and so we added a lot to it, but the two things will go together, right? Last week and this week go together, but it also stands alone this week if you weren't with us last week. So let's hold here. So when we respond to Turkey, we respond and we say, oh my God, evil's a failure of pleasure, right? Like, right? In other words, evil's a failure of outrageous love. And the reason we scream and protest, right, both to the Turkish government and to the Syrian government, right, and to the failures of appropriate aid, right, and to the divine, is because it shouldn't be this way, and we know it shouldn't be this way, and we're absolutely sure that we live in an intimate universe. So suffering doesn't cause me to actually lose connection to the goodness of the universe. Suffering actually connects me to the goodness of the universe. And I want to just get you the last sentence and we'll be there. In other words, one of the reasons I went deeper into spirit in my 20s, and there was a moment I grew up deep in Aramaic text, and there was a moment I thought to leave. I'd studied an enormous amount of science, an enormous amount of philosophy. And I said, am I staying? And I realized I couldn't formulate the sentence, evil is wrong, without spirit. Did you ever get that? When I say wrong, not technically wrong, not functionally wrong, but it's a violation of the actual order of reality. You cannot say that without spirit. When I say spirit, I mean a ground of intrinsic value. And let me use a different word, without the Tao. Right? If you've fallen out of the Tao, let me use the word Tao if that works better for you. But the Tao means a field of intrinsic value. If good is not real, right, and truth is not real, and beauty is not real, they're evolving, but they're real. If they're not real, then evil's not a violation of anything real. And by the way, the guy who got this really well was Bertrand Russell. And Bertrand Russell remarks, he says, the only problem with my atheism is that I can't believe that the only problem with wanton cruelty is that I don't like it. Isn't that a great sentence? Bertrand Russell. He says, the only problem with my atheism is that I can't believe that the only problem with wanton cruelty is I don't like it. No, it's a violation of reality. right? And it's only that sense that we violated the field of value that arouses our political will and arouses our moral will, right? Like that, okay? So we live in a world of outrageous pain. Last sentence, the only response is outrageous love. The response of outrageous love is the affirmation of the intimate universe, and evil's a failure of intimacy. Evil's a failure of eros. Evil's a failure of clarified pleasure, number one. And number two, we commit outrageous acts of love, right? In this moment, we're atheists. We don't say this was God's will. No, right? No. It's just us. Right? The whole thing depends on us, right? We have to step in. We have to commit our outrageous acts of love in every possible way that we can. Okay. Let's hold here. Okay. And let's open up for, for any questions, right? That kind of come up here because it deserves some conversation. Okay. And we'll close with prayer. Okay. So David, I saw that you had a question. David, we'll start with you.
Sure. You ready?
Take it away.
Okay.
Man.
So, and you just ended it with it. So it's very appropriate. You said the whole thing depends on us. And then, however, a few weeks ago, most of you were probably here, the 9th principle of outrageous love, you said that in order to close the gap between our ability to heal and feel the pain, we have to realize that it's not all up to us to heal the whole thing, but rather to address our unique need and the unique circle of intimacy and influence. But then, you said it's all depends on us. Sometimes you say it all hangs in a balance, 50-50. The next moment, it depends on us. And also you talk about pleasure and level 6 pleasure. Those of you who know the levels of pleasure is that my personal transformation transforms the whole thing, the pleasure of power. And so it's seemingly can be contradictory on the surface. So I'm curious to see how you want to reconcile those two statements.
That's great. Thank you, David. And I'll just recapitulate because again, sometimes if you're new this week, so we're not playing insider baseball. So, we've been together for about a decade trying to articulate this new story of value, this new story of cosmorotic humanism. So I know sometimes you might come in and say, like, I'm not familiar with that. So first off, write us an email. And there's lots of texts that are not published. We'll be publishing them on the new website, even incomplete books we're going to publish. Right. Krista just published 2 versions of the Outrageous Love book, which we'll talk about later, but we're going to be publishing just pretty much a lot in its incomplete version as Zohar and I and, the team are kind of completing them. So what David's referring to 2 things. One, we just said, right, it's all up to you, right? Be an atheist. It's only you, right? It's yours to do. Number 1. Number 2, there's a general experience of Homo Amor that we've talked about. When we're the new human and the new humanity, which we call Homo Amor, the fulfillment of Homo sapien as Homo Amor, what we call the 4th Big Bang, the emergence of this new possibility for a human being and a humanity, which has always happened in history. There's been different stages of humanity, and now as we're facing a meta-crisis, the only way to actually respond to a meta-crisis is for a new human and a new humanity to emerge. So one of the characteristics of Homo Amor, and this is what David was referring to, is that Homo Amor experiences all of reality as being 50-50, totally balanced, and my next act tips the scale. That's part of the experience, the evolutionary experience of Homo Amor. Okay? So that's 2. So there's this sense of, and then the third thing David refers to is that in these 6 levels of pleasure, the 6th level of pleasure is the experience of pleasure of what we call evolutionary unique self. Right? So there's separate self, which is just ordinary me, separate self, ego self. Then I realize, no, I'm true self. I'm part of the field of value. I'm inextricable and inseparable from the field of value. We call that true self. I'm part of the one. But then I realize, number 3, I'm unique self. I'm a unique expression of the field of value. And then number 4, actually, I'm a unique expression living in an evolutionary context, right? Evolution's moving through me. I'm an evolutionary unique self. Those are the 4 selves. So the experience of evolutionary unique self is I'm omni-considerate for the sake of the whole. That every move I make is not just me. I don't just have integrity. I have evolutionary integrity. And evolutionary integrity means, right, Myra, that I'm omni-considerate, meaning I consider everything. Every move I make, it's not just me. It's how does this affect the whole? I'm thinking I can feel the whole living inside of me. And that's the experience of the 6th level of pleasure, which is the pleasure of power, where actually, no, I have a lived direct experience that my next action actually affects the whole. that the whole actually lives in me and I live in the whole, and that actually I'm part of the fabric of existence, and I have the power, therefore, to actually take an action which will ripple through the whole system. Think about the butterfly effect in physics, right? A butterfly flaps its wings in Tokyo, and something happens here in Vermont. That's why it got so cold. Okay, right? So here we go, right? So that's right. You get that? So David says, well, you got all of that on one side, right? But then on the other side, David says, right, in the principles of outrageous love, one of the principles is we ask a question and we say, why isn't everyone committing their act of outrageous love? Right? If unique self is right and you're supposed to commit, the reason we're born is to commit the outrageous acts of love that are a function of our unique self. So the question is, we talked about this 2-3 weeks ago, why isn't everyone doing it? It's the most ecstatic, beautiful experience. Why isn't everyone out there committing their outrageous acts of love and actually healing the whole? So the answer is because people are overwhelmed, not because we're bad people, not because our ego, hijacked us, right? And we're kind of lost in narcissistic selfishness. No, that's not why. But it's because we look at it and it's just, right, Celeste, it's just too big. Just there's too much, right? We're just overwhelmed, right? How can we even step in? How can we take our seat at the table? It just seems impossible. So our response to that is in the 10 steps of outrageous love and the Dharma of outrageous love is that's actually an egoic trap. The ego traps us and says, you got to do the whole thing. The answer is you don't have to do the whole thing. It's not yours to do. Let it all go. However, there's a unique set of outrageous acts of love that are yours to do in your unique circle of intimacy and influence. So in other words, the reason we don't step in and commit our outrageous acts of love is because we feel like we won't have any impact. We feel the pain, but the gap between our ability to feel the pain and heal the pain is too great. So we close our hearts. So our response to that is, no, you don't have to heal the whole thing. Just do what's yours to do. Your outrageous acts of love that are a function of your unique self. So David points out here, it's actually a very sharp discernment on his part, is that there's these two different strains in the story of cosmoerotic humanism. And one says you heal the whole thing. It's yours to do. The other says, well, actually, no, that's an egoic movement, right? And you have to step back and realize it's not all yours to heal and commit, right, your outrageous acts of love. So which is right? Okay. So you guys know the old, when I say guys, I mean people, right? Y'all remember the old Jewish story about the two people who come to the rabbi and, the wife overhears the conversation and the rabbi says to one, you're right. And then the other person comes with a complete contradictory claim, and the rabbi says, you're right. Right. And his wife comes and says, how can you do that? They're both contradicting each other. And he says to his wife, you're also right. Right. So there's a sense of paradox here. Okay, right? In other words, both positions are actually holding something that's right. Right? On the one hand, I actually have a real lived experience that it's actually mine to heal. And I actually experience ontologically, meaning ontologically, right? The actual, right, Angel, the actual domain of the real. I have a direct experience that I'm not separate from the field of value. And what I do actually enters the field of value. And if you could just imagine, it's quite literal. I do an action, and that action is not a separate self-action in my domain. If you can just imagine it as a virus, that action is a virus. It's a positive virus, and it enters the field, and it literally affects the entire field. So in that sense, my next action directly affects the entire field and has the capacity to transform the whole thing, which is why my experience of Homo Amor is that, and David referred to this, is that my transformation is the transformation of the whole, right? Because actually my transformation participates in the whole, because cosmoerotic humanism is what we might call a participatory spirituality. I participate in the whole and the whole participates in me. There's a mutual participatory experience, right? And so when I do something, it's not a separate self doing something in this very limited domain. It's actually, imagine that I'm a cell. And just like every cell knows each other and impacts each other, so imagine that every being in reality is a cell. Because actually, that's true, right? In other words, the way the interior scientists say it is that just like there's an Ak, right? Just like there's a small human being in which everything is connected in a non-local way, which has now been validated by molecular biology, so too all of reality is organismic, and we're all cells in that reality. So that which I do directly impacts the whole. That's actually correct, right? In other words, you actually understand reality as being, right, this great human body. That's Da Vinci's famous image of the body, right? Remember Da Vinci's image with the hands out and there's this meridian grid? So what he's actually, that image comes from the interior sciences, which envisions all of reality as a human body, right? And in this human body, all the cells know each other. And that image went from Luria to Da Vinci into the Renaissance. It was the basis of modern humanism, right? That humanity, right, actually is the body of reality. But of course, we left out animals. So we need to include animals, right? And but there's this body of living being in which everything affects each other. So if you really get that, and you also get that the human being is both continuous and discontinuous. Human being is obviously clearly a quantum leap. That's why dogs don't build hospitals. I love dogs. All the dog people don't get mad at me, but I've never seen a dog build a hospital, right? It doesn't happen. Right now, dogs also don't make atomic bombs, right? I understand, right? But in other words, but the point is human beings have the capacity of exponential destruction and exponential creativity. But the human beings and animals, we're all cells in this larger piece. When I actually awaken, outrgeous, to my own self-realization, that's what conscious evolution means. I realize that I'm a cell in the whole, right? We don't have any information that a cell realizes that it's part of the whole. It's inherent. We don't know the interior experience of a cell, but there's lots of reasons not to believe that cells don't actually have that realization the way we do, right? So we actually realize we're part of the whole. Then my transformation transforms the whole. At the same time, I can't take on, from an egoic, separate self perspective, I can't take on the sense that I have to heal the whole. From a separate self perspective, what I have to do is I've got to say, okay, let me first fix myself. Let me transform myself from separate self to unique self. Number two, as unique self, what are the unique, outrageous acts of love that I can commit in my unique circle of intimacy and influence? So we say that because that's the methodology that liberates us from the experience of impotence. Because when I'm impotent, I close my heart, right? Because the gap between my ability to feel the pain and heal the pain is too great. I'm impotent, I close my heart. So I need to repotentiate. I need to become potent again. How do I become potent again? By actually realizing it's not mine to heal the whole thing, right, in a direct way, but it is mine in a direct way. I'm talking about direct healing, not that my virus or my cell knows all the other cells, not that experience of realization, but actually in a direct, visible to the naked eye, my direct healing, right? I can't take that all on. Right? Zohar can't say it's my fault that in Turkey, people didn't follow the code and instead used what are called amnesties. Zohar can't say, Kirsten Zohar, she can't say, my fault. If she says it's my fault, she'll go insane. She'll literally go insane. She has to realize, no, it's not her job in Turkey, right, to actually change the government. She can't do it. She can't do it. She's got to let go of that. But she can step in and be the brilliant artistic senior fellow and editorial director, right? And brilliant artist of the Great Library to actually birth, right? With her wonderful mind and heart and embodiment to actually be a co-creator and birthing the Great Library. She can do that with all her heart and soul and commit outrageous acts of love, right? In that enactment, right? So does everyone get it? You've got to actually hold both. Beautiful, right? You got to hold both. It's deep. So David, that's fantastic, right? It's deep. It's paradoxical. It's deep. Okay. So everyone get a sense of that? Well, let's just show of hands here. Terry, you have a question? Terry, go ahead.
I'm sitting here in California. I look over my back and I can see where the San Andreas Fault is. And all the scientists have said the big one is coming. Now, I want to say that I'm hoping, should the big one come to where I am now, that people will be attentive to my suffering and not say, you dummy, you shouldn't have done that. You chose to live where there are earthquakes and you don't deserve my compassion because you allured it, you brought it on yourself. Now, in regard to, we invited our own suffering, my question is, if I go through or anybody goes through life with a kick me sign over their head, literally and figuratively sometimes, and they get kicked and they bring that, it looks to me like they bring that suffering on themselves. Now, I I find myself challenged to be compassionate for that suffering. Maybe I'll be compassionate for they weren't loved well when they were younger, and now they go through life with I deserve to be kicked. Maybe my approach to that suffering would be to help them to see the sign and maybe author a different sign. But I'm challenged when I see people going through life with the kick me sign, because most people, when they see and experience somebody with the kick me sign, it's really hard not to kick them. So in that case, it seems like we invite our suffering.
Tom, it's great to see you. I just unpacked your book and put it in the library, right? And it's Tom wrote a fantastic book on kind of where we are in terms of the medical rights. It's a big blue book, right? It's just a fantastic piece of work, right? And just like bows, it's just great to see you. Great to see you. So Terry, Terry, I'm gonna respond. Terry's dear friend and partner. I'm gonna respond super gently. Terry's also has been a major trainer in the human potential kind of world, right? In which human potential world and the New Age world, both of them are both places which I was referring to, who actually adopt, and Terry's question is actually evidence for what I'm saying. It's an indication of what I'm saying. And they actually adopt a human potential version of the medieval religious position. And the medieval religious position was, right, you create your own suffering through sinning. The human potential version of it is you create your own suffering by wearing a kick me sign, right? In other words, so Terry's actually his question is evidence for precisely what I was saying, that position is very strong, a very strong position. And what I would respond with so much gentleness and honor, right, to my friend Terry, right? There is a certain truth to both the medieval position and the human potential position, right? So if I go and punch someone and they punch me back, well, I probably had something to do with that circuit, right? Right? If I don't take responsibility to fix my life, right, then probably there's some responsibility. That's obviously true. However, here's the big however, there's a certain dimension of suffering to which that doesn't apply. And I'm going to make 2 points. One, so that doesn't apply, right, to Rwanda, right? In other words, and there's some sense in which what Terry's actually saying, let me go a little deeper. What Terry's actually saying is a version of, and my friend, an old friend of mine, I haven't talked to in many years. We knew each other for many years. We did a big debate. We debated each other in LA in like 2005. And his name is Dennis Prager, who runs something called Prager University, right? And, Dennis's basic response to suffering, and Prager University has like some 6 billion views in America, and it's now the center of kind of the conservative response to woke in the United States political scene. And so Dennis's basic position is don't get mad at reality. You chose it. It was your choice, right? It's human choice that creates suffering, which is some version, Terry, of what you're saying. So take responsibility for your choice. And I said to Dennis, in our debate, which is, yes, there's a dimension of human choice that creates suffering. And there's also this huge dimension, right, that actually you can't attribute to human choice, right? Which is there's this quality of reality which allows for suffering, right? And that quality of reality, certainly within a period of one lifetime, you can't attribute to choice. So the mother, right, of a Tutsi child in Rwanda, right, who sees her child being ripped apart by Hutu swords, right? You can't say to that mother, you invited that suffering into your life, nor can you say it to that baby, right? You just can't do it. It's not doable. Can't say it. Now, of course, the religious position is, it's a reincarnation. So it's payback from the previous life. So that's where we move into obscenity, right? And it's obscene, even if it's true, right? Does everyone know what I'm saying? In other words, even if it might, right? In other words, when you see suffering, we live in a world of outrageous pain. The only response is outrageous love. That's the only possible response you can give. Any attempt to do theologic is obscene. So first you have to respond to outrageous love. First you have to reject all theodicies. After you've rejected all theodicies, then you can consider them again on the other side, right? So there's got to be a kind of, right? That's one. But here's two. Why do some people have the capacity, right, to actually turn their suffering, right, into transformation? Others don't. I'm looking at my friend Harry here, and I can't out Harry, but I will just say one thing. He's been a therapist for many years, and I think a very brilliant and gifted and loving therapist. So Harry can confirm whether this is true or not. He may disagree with me, but here's my observation from my years. We work with some people and they have the capacity to transform it, and others for some reason don't, right? And people can have the same experience of suffering, right? So for example, I went through an enormous life tragedy in 2006, a false accusation, right? That should have crushed me and killed me. And I did everything I could to move through it and to come out more joyous and, and more alive. So now I can explain to you all the good things that I did to kind of transform myself, but my capacity to do that, where did I get that capacity from? Oh, because I trained myself earlier. Or where did I get that capacity from? Any capacity that we have is in the end not fully ours. And it's why some people, like why we have the capacity to do the work and other people don't, is a mystery. Right. And so, yes, we should push people to do the work. Yes, we should invite people to change the sign on their life from a kick me sign to a beautiful sign. But why, in the end, we have to be devotional to people and love people madly and know that we don't actually fully understand, right, why some people get shattered and other people manage to turn fate into destiny. That's a mystery. And part of the arrogance of religion and the arrogance of human potential religion is the capacity to stand in front of the room and tell everyone one size fits all, you can transform this. That's not true. Not everyone in that room can. And I just want to say, right, and I said this to a friend of Terry's, Mr. Hanley, right, and I said this to Werner Erhard, and when we had a long talk, we sat for 4 or 5 hours in a bar in San Francisco, when Werner created the forum, I said, it's cruel to stand in front of a room and say to the room, you can all transform this. Actually, that's not true. Some people in this room can transform this and some people can't, right? And so we need to both call people to transformation and be devotional at the same time. And that's what Homo more needs to be, right? So I love Terry's inquiry. And Terry's, of course, Terry and I have discussed this and we've come to a deep shared understanding of this. And we're actually working together on a little monograph on victim and player. Right? So Terry's kind of speaking. He was being generous here and speaking for that position, which actually allowed us to clarify, which is fantastic. So thank you. Do we have time for one more question? We have time. Many more questions. What do you got? Krista?
I invite you, Vashti. You raised your hand a while ago. Go ahead.
Vashti, it's great to see you.
It's really good to be here.
Great to see you.
You said today that pleasure is the source of all ethics, which reminded me that many places in the Dharma, both written and spoken, say that the source of all ethics is in the sexual. And I don't understand that. So I would like examples of how that happens, how that is accurate.
That's a great inquiry, Vashti. Vashti, it's great to see you. It's great to see you. So let me be clear. It's a fantastic inquiry. And I'll do it very, very briefly. So we don't exactly say, what we say is, right, that the sexual models the erotic, right? And part of the experience of the sexual is pleasure. So let me see what that means. That's a great inquiry. I love the inquiry. So let me just say it this way in like 5 or 6 sentences. So one, and I'm doing a little shorthand, people, because I know most of us have played some insider baseball before, and usually at about 1 o'clock, a whole bunch of new people drop off. So now we're kind of, so there's, let's see if we can do this in 4 minutes, but I'll do it quickly, but see if we can get it really clear. So one, Eros and sex are not the same. That's one. Two, there was about 12 billion years of Eros before sex. Before there was any sex in the world, there was 12 billion years of Eros, right? So Eros is the movement of radical aliveness, desiring ever deeper contact and ever greater wholeness. That's the Eros equation. 12 billion years of Eros before sex. That's two. Three, Eros always seeks to create new wholes So when Eros ran out of its ability to create new holes, it said, let's make love. Meaning, let's create this new form of zygote sexual reproduction in which we create new originalities. And what sexual reproduction means is that through the zygote form of sexual reproduction, we create, right, through the chromosomal process, radical new originality. So my friend Howard Bloom, the philosopher of science, right, said to me the other day, he said, I really get it. When reality started sexuality, it made a commitment to unique self, meaning to radical uniqueness, right? Sexuality generates, right? Sexuality is a new form of Eros that through the sexual process generates radical uniqueness, right? Because it takes half of mom and half of dad and creates something new. Okay. So that's 3. 4, once sexual becomes a model for the erotic, you can actually look at the sexual and realize that in the sexual are all ethics, right? That's true. So in the sexual, for example, giving and receiving are one. There's no split between giving and receiving, right? There's not, have I put money in or taken money out? Giving and receiving are one. And there's a whole list in a book called A Return to Eros, maybe in the chat box, right? Which talks about the 12 qualities of the sexual that are modeled by Eros. So all of that is true. Now, the sexual itself, one of the qualities of the sexual is pleasure, right? Vashti, that's one of the qualities of the sexual on a good day, right? One of the qualities of the sexual is pleasure. So what that means is that pleasure itself is a value of reality. So sexual and pleasure actually go together, right? They're not actually separate. And as you can't actually split the sexual and pleasure, they're complete entwined experiences. And when I say pleasure, I don't mean the pleasure of orgasm, right? There's lots of ways to do sexing, right? Let's talk about sexuality in its broadest sense, is the sense of being touched and felt and, the embodied contact, the pleasure of embodied contact. So the sexual and the pleasure of embodied contact are one, right? And so through the sexual, you can get to, right, all of ethics, right? But you'll have to raise the sexual, right? Understand the sexual is not merely physical, right? But the sexual is beauty and depth of Eros and embodied contact between two human beings. That's true. So in that sense, the sexual is the source of all ethics. However, it's also true that if you understand the sexual on its deepest level, the sexual is actually happening not only on the physical level, but actually reality is sex all the way up and all the way down. The way Luria said it, Isaac Luria, right? Reality is lines and circles interpenetrating each other in every second. Or the way Vashti, the great interior scientist, said it, they said reality is Eros Gamos, the marriage of the god and the goddess happening all across every field of reality in every second. So in other words, reality itself is Eros, or reality itself is sexing, right? And reality is always sexing. Every encounter, right, is an encounter in which we're either loving the moment open or allowing the moment to love us open. We're touching the moment or the moment is touching us. We're arousing the moment and the moment is arousing us. And in that deep interpenetration of contact, something new is born, right? And so actually, when we say the sexual models all ethics, what you were pointing to today very brilliantly and very discerningly was that actually, we don't mean just the sexual. We mean the sexual at all levels of reality, right? We mean Eros Gamos at all levels of reality. We actually live in a sexual cosmos. We live in an amorous cosmos, and it's actually sexuality all the way up and all the way down. And in every learning experience, there's a penetration and there's a receiving. In every creative experience, in every exchange, in every moment is a sexual interaction. So we've exiled the sexual to what we call sex. But actually the sexual is Eros. It's actually Eros all the way up and all the way down. When you really get it, so the way we start the Dharma is we split and we say, no, there's sex, but it's actually sex is a model of Eros. But then at the other side of the Dharma, we realize actually, once we realize the sexual is an expression of the erotic, of Eros, then we go deeper and we realize, and that's what Vashti is pointing to, that actually sex and Eros come back together sex and eros come back together. And it's actually sexual eros and erotic sexuality at the physical, at the spiritual, at the emotional, at the psychological, at the intellectual, right? At the existential, actually at the technological, at all levels of reality. It's all, right? And again, permission from Oriana, right? I apologize for saying it this way, but it captures something, right? It's fuck all the way down and fuck all the way up, right? But by fuck, we mean love plus eros. We don't mean that degraded word, right? We mean, no, it's actually eros all the way up and all the way down. There's that quality all the way up and all the way down. So Vashti, that was a little bit of an approach into this question. Okay? Yay. All right, thank you. Beautiful. That's a beautiful inquiry. That's fantastic.